Welcome to season 13 of the Parenting Aces podcast, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I am your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we have with us from Australia, Coach Todd Larkham. Todd is a former tour player, a former coach with Tennis Australia, now a private coach in Australia, and part of the new CoachLife community, which, if you listen to our last podcast, you know about. CoachLife is a new online platform for tennis coaches to share their knowledge, their information, their developmental strategies, their techniques with all of us. And it is a subscription service that we have partnered with. And as a result of that partnership, CoachLife is offering a discount to all of you. So you'll need to check the show notes on parentingaces.com to get that discount code. For this episode, the code is TODD, T-O-D-D, capital P, capital A for Parenting Aces. Again, Todd, P-A. If you go to CoachLife.com, you need to go through our link in the show notes in order to utilize that discount code. So I'm super excited for y'all to hear from Todd. Todd has been at this coaching thing for decades. He worked very closely with Nick Kyrgios through his developmental years. He's worked with many, many top Australian players and continues to work with juniors who are on a path to playing at an elite level, whether that's coming to the States for college, playing at a high level recreationally, or going on to the pro tour. And he's got just gems of information that he shares with us in this episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Coach Todd Larkham. Todd, welcome to the Parenting Aces podcast. It is a pleasure to meet you. I'm so glad we could find a time between Australian time and California time to make this work.
Hi, Lisa. Yes, so glad to be here. Really looking forward to chatting with you, and I love talking tennis at any time. So really looking forward to it.
Well, I think it's always fun to talk to coaches that are in different parts of the world because I'm pretty entrenched in American tennis. Most of my audience is based here in the States, though we have listeners all over the place. And I think sometimes we get very kind of single-minded. We put those blinders on and we think, well, we do it this way, so everybody around the world does it this way too. And come to find out that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We talk as coaches, we talk about how we're in the Australian bubble, and then we get really isolated down here. We're a long way from anywhere, a long way to Europe and the States, and so it's hugely important for us as coaches to travel, but to also to talk to coaches and other tennis people from other countries. Hugely important. So I really agree with that, and it's such great education learning from other countries and from other people how they do it, because as we know, countries do it differently. And there's more than one way to skin a cat and be successful in tennis, more than one pathway for a junior or a player, and for coaches as well. So, yeah, sharing information is just the best way to learn, I believe, as a coach and as a parent and as a player.
For sure, for sure. And we're going to jump into that a little more as we go on. But I want to start by letting you kind of introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about how you got started in tennis.
Sure, yeah, I really come from a tennis family. Both my parents were tennis coaches. I actually grew up at a tennis center, which is quite unique. My parents in the late 70s actually decided that they wanted to build their own tennis center. So they bought a block of land in Canberra, Australia, which is the capital of Australia, but it's a smallish city of about 400,000 people. They actually built a tennis center. They connected our house to the center, so we lived on site. So I actually grew up my whole life from the age of 3 to 20 when I went on the pro tour living at a tennis center. So I really born and bred into tennis. I coached from a young age, helped out at the club for a young age, and played juniors, and then hit the pro tour when I was about 20 and played professional tennis for 10 years. And then I've been coaching elite junior tennis players, so athletes between really the age of 10 and 17 for the past 20 years now. So worked for the Federation for Tennis Australia and also privately by myself. So really spent my whole life in tennis. And yeah, been through the whole journey as a player and as a coach now.
I love that. I have to ask you, have you read the book Apples Never Fall?
I haven't actually read that book, no. But should
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like it's your life. It's
sure.
about a family where the parents build a tennis center and their kids grow up, and it's set in Australia.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I feel like maybe, I don't know,
I
you
can't
should
believe I
ask your
haven't.
family if they got interviewed for that.
Yeah, I can't believe I haven't read that. I'm gonna go and get that. That sounds really interesting. Thanks
Yeah,
for
it's
telling
actually,
me.
it's a series on Apple TV, I think now. I don't
Okay,
know if
wow.
can y'all get Apple TV there?
We can get that here. Yeah, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
have a look.
Yeah, you
Great.
should watch.
Cool.
The book's way better than the series, though. The book's way
Okay,
more
cool.
focused on the tennis. Anyway,
Yeah.
sideline there for a second. But as you're telling your story, I'm like, that sounds really familiar. That's so funny.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about how junior tennis development looks in Australia versus, well, not versus the US, because you haven't coached in the US, but I really just want the Parenting Aces audience to hear how things are done in your country. We have had Australian coaches on before, so this isn't brand new information, but it's been a while. So I think it's always interesting to talk to somebody that did work with the Federation and has now gone off and working privately, and what the differences are in maybe the pathways, but also the freedoms that you have as a coach that maybe you did or didn't have when you were part of the Federation as well.
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we see around the world how much involvement federations have, and some have a huge involvement in the development of their players, and others don't. And in Australia, we've had varying degrees of that. But right now in Australia, Tennis Australia has actually stepped back just a little bit. So in that kind of age group from when players start playing tennis, kids start playing tennis at, 5, 6, 7, all the way through to the age of really 17 now. We don't have right now academies or environments that Tennis Australia actually fund and that players are put into. So we're really, the last probably 3 to 4 years, we've been really the private coach doing the job. Whereas the 15 years before that, so from 2005 all the way through to 2020, we actually had Tennis Australia heavily involved in the development of players. So we had what we called national academies. So we have 8 capital cities in Australia. So in every capital city, we had a national academy, which was fully funded by Tennis Australia. They
Wow.
employed the coaches. They provided all the funding for strength and conditioning, psychology, facilities, travel, everything for the kids. We actually took the kids on at a very young age into these academies. So between the age of 10 and 12, we'd take them on, they'd be given scholarships, and then they'd come into those academies, and nearly all of their training and coaching and playing would be within those national academies. 5, 6 days a week of tennis, all the travel, all the other aspects that go with being an elite junior player. So really interesting. And I think actually we were really successful in that period. So it was a bit strange that we've gone away from that, but I believe we were really successful in that kind of period between 2005 and 2020. And we've seen that now in the pro ranks where we've actually had, for Australia, we're not a huge country. We've actually had a pretty successful period. So right now we've got 9 male players in the top 100. We don't have as many girls, but we had Ash Barty, who came through that whole system, who won multiple Grand Slams. I wish she's still playing, but she
And
was a
we miss
hugely
her. Yeah.
successful. We really miss her, but she was hugely successful and came through those academies, spent 10 years in the academy up in Brisbane in Australia. So it's interesting. I was head coach of the Canberra Academy for 15 years, and now I'm working privately. So it is interesting to see the differences. I mean, in the academy, I had everything I could possibly need and so well funded. But so I only ever coached 4 or 5 players at a time. It's only a small amount. I was able to spend a huge amount of time with those players and travel everywhere with them, including overseas, and really spend a long period of time, an average of 5 to 7 years with those players. And I coached Nick Kyrgios from the age of 10 all the way through to 18. So I got to spend, 8 years with him and do the whole
Wow.
junior journey with him.
Mhm.
So, and a bunch of other players. So it's interesting now. It's been a new challenge for me. How do I get similar results as what I did before? Only seeing my players for far less time, not able to travel. And I'm finding that it's been very, very difficult. And the contrast has been huge, really. Just keep trying to find ways to coach better and do better in the less time that I have with my players. So that's a long answer to that question, but I can go into it more. But yeah, it is interesting how to see how Tennis Australia has really stepped back in the last three to 4 years.
Do you know why that is?
Oh, look, it's really controversial. It's highly political, as most of these federations and sports are at the highest level, with board members, with CEOs. Without going into it too much, all the politics of it, I just think that maybe they felt that they needed a change, and maybe that we were not giving private coaches the opportunity to really develop elite players. I think that's one. Private coaches were really making a lot of noise about how they were losing their players and they didn't have a chance to really develop their players. So I think that was probably the number one reason. There are other political things involved as well.
Sounds very similar to things
Yeah,
that have gone on in USTA. Yeah,
yeah,
interesting. I want to ask you a couple things. One, I want to ask you about player ID, and when you were with Tennis Australia, what were the factors that you as a coach or the federation or in conjunction y'all were looking for to say this kid needs to come train with us? The
yeah,
second piece of that is having to do with academics and parental involvement and where those fit into the equation when a kid is tapped on the shoulder and said, yes, you're the one we want, come train with us, we're going to
yeah,
give you everything you need.
yeah. So it's really interesting because you would think that when we identify players and when we choose players in these academies, you'd think that the coaches would sit down, would look at the players and we say, these players have got the qualities that we want and some don't, therefore we'll pick those players. But that's not actually how we did it. We had a criteria, which was written down. Everyone knew about it. You had to hit certain results. So let's say
So it
you're
was
11 years
results
old,
based solely.
purely results-based criteria,
Wow.
purely. You're 11 years old or you're 12 years old, you have to make the quarterfinals of a national title, for example, or the semifinals, or you have to be ranked X in Australia, and you're
Interesting.
in. You're in, regardless of whether we think you could make it or we don't, or whether we think you've got the qualities or not. So that's really interesting.
That's
As a coach,
dangerous, it
it's
seems.
dangerous. Yep. So you hit the criteria, you're offered the scholarship, and you're in. Okay, if you're in the academies and if you don't meet certain standards or you're not committing to the program, etc., well then the discussion could be had that maybe it's not the right place for you. But yeah, recruiting, that's all we looked at. As a coach, that's totally different. Really, you're sitting down and you're looking at the things that you think that really matter. For me as a coach, the number one thing is competitiveness. I want the kids who are passionate about the sport and really you can see them out in the court trying so hard, fighting so hard, and they really want to be there and compete. And probably that's the number one criteria for me. And obviously you're looking at other things, athleticism, results, all those other things that you look at. But the number one thing for me is always I want that born competitor. Often that born competitor might have some behavior issues because they're so highly competitive. It's hard for them to control their temper and their emotions on court. But I
Nick
think as a coach,
Kyrgios.
we can, yeah, no, yeah, not mentioning him. But yeah, he's a good example. When I first saw him play at 10 years old, well, it was early, it was about 9 years old. I was running a tournament at the tennis center I was coaching at, and this kid out there was just competing like no other kid I'd ever seen. and just so passionate about winning and playing. And I thought, wow, he was a good player, but he wasn't exceptionally good. And he was very, very poor athlete. So it's interesting how we can really coach those things, but it's real. I think the most difficult thing to coach is competitiveness. You want the born competitor, and then you can channel them in the right direction. If you have a kid who, I've got two daughters, one's super competitive, the other isn't. So you can just see that my younger daughter, who's super competitive, is great in a tennis, or she's a dancer, great in that environment. My other daughter is not really into sport. So she doesn't really like that competitiveness. So it's really interesting. So I want that born competitor. So that was answering your first question, purely results based. What was your second half? Sorry.
About the academics and the parental
Oh,
involvement.
yeah. So really interesting, isn't it? Parents play a huge role, as a huge role in the development of the players. And I suppose coaches approach it differently. Some coaches want the parents involved, some don't, some try to cut the parents out. I think my experience as a coach over the journey is that I really want to embrace the parents. I want to get to know them. I want to build relationships with them. I want to get them involved as much as I can. I definitely don't want to cut them out. And so parents are a nightmare. I don't want them involved. I really want them involved, but I think as a coach and a parent, you have to just know what your roles are. That's really probably the number one thing. As you might have heard from other coaches, what are the roles of the parents and what are the roles of the coaches, and how do you work together to really develop the person, the kid as a player, but also as a person, and what skills and do they need over the long term. I can expand on that answer if you want, but yeah, I'm a coach that really wants to embrace the parents and be part of the team, and really the team around the athlete, to try to improve them through the journey.
Yeah. And so what role did the Federation play in the academic piece for these kids that you're, bringing on at a pretty young age?
We are. Yeah, probably not enough, to be honest. Probably very little, actually, and that's something we probably could have done better with. Certainly once the players hit year 11 and 12, so their last 2 years of high school before they go to college, we we offered uh, academics and schooling as a distance program, and we offered them on site at the academies, where we brought in a teacher to spend several hours a day and teaching them those subjects, as it not going to school as such. But prior to that, not as much. But in each academy, every coach probably had a little bit of leeway to do it how they liked. But we certainly encouraging the kids to stay at school full time throughout Australia, throughout Tennis Australia. So we're actually not. So we wouldn't actually give, if kids wanted to leave school before their last 2 years of high school, they weren't allowed to be on scholarship. You actually had to stay at school.
I
That's
love
something
that.
maybe different. Yeah, we force them to stay at school. Force them is strange. They should be at school anyway, but we actually would not take on kids. So if you want to leave school, then you have to go with your private coach, and you can't be involved with the federation. You have to do it on your own.
Very
So
interesting, because I know there are a lot of Australian players that wind up coming to the States to play college tennis. And,
yeah,
the ones that I've met have been fine academically. They have not struggled with the
yep.
academic piece. So y'all are obviously you were doing something right, to
Yeah.
prepare them.
I think we're probably doing quite well in that area, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do see I see a lot of kids around the world leaving school, and a lot of parents come to me and say, "I'm going to take my kids out of school at 13 or 14," and I say, "No way, you're kidding." There's enough time in the day. That's my biggest. There's enough time in the day to get on court and hit so many tennis balls. In a 2 hour session, you can hit thousands of tennis balls. There's enough time in the day to do everything. I really believe that, and still attend school from. It's only the night hours of 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Australia. So you can be out of school at 3:05 and at the court at 3:30 and on court hitting. So there's lots and lots of time. Then you got all weekend all the school holidays. So I don't see the reason to leave school. I know that coaches will have different opinions on that, but I just believe you need to be a balanced person as well as to be a good player.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Amen.
need to be a
Amen.
balanced person, and there's more than to life, as we know, than tennis. There's certainly more than
Sometimes.
chasing. Yeah, sometimes I know. I was obsessed with tennis through juniors and through playing as a pro. But as you get older, you realize that there's more to life. And if I look back on my own career, gee, I wish I'd studied more when I was on tour. I wish I'd learned other skills. I actually wish I'd probably gone to US college. I hit the tour, at 19 years old, and those first 2 or 3 years really struggled, as most people do. You struggle, and you're like, well, I could have probably been at college and struggled, and then hit the tour and developed my game there. So it's interesting. But we are sending a lot of players over to the US now. A lot of
Yeah.
players to US college,
Yeah.
heaps of players, and I've sent probably 8 or 9 players that I've coached there, and they've had fantastic experiences. Some only a couple have gone on to try to play pro tennis, but the ones that haven't have absolutely no regrets that they went there, and they've had incredible experiences, and they've got education and that lifestyle over there. And then, most have come back to Australia, but they're all so glad that they went.
Yeah, I love hearing that. It's a great experience for the kids. And it's, to the American parents listening to this, it's a great experience for the American kids to have kids from other cultures come and be part of a team too and learn from each other. And,
Yeah.
my son's my best example of that, now living in New
Cool.
Zealand with his college teammates. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good outcome for a lot of these players as they're coming up. I want to just ask you from a developmental side, now that you're coaching privately, if you had a kid come to you at, let's say, age 7, 8, 9, just getting started, maybe starting to play tournaments, maybe not yet, can you kind of walk us through what the ideal week would look like in terms of their
Absolutely.
tennis training?
That's probably the number one question that parents ask me, and parents
Yeah.
call and email me about. And so I have written a document actually which details every birth year, I think, what they should be doing and
Oh,
how many
wow.
hours they should be doing. But at that young age,
Will
I've
you share that with us?
sure I can send that to
Okay,
you. Yeah, absolutely,
that'd be
yeah.
fantastic. Okay.
I always think a good guide is the amount of hours you do is roughly how old you are. So if you're 8 years old, you should be doing roughly 8 hours of tennis. But I don't say that seems a lot at 8. But I don't, it doesn't have to be all with a coach, drilling and intense tennis. You're going to be competing. You're going to be coming to some kind of group session. You're hopefully doing a private lesson from a young age to learn the correct technique. You might be doing 1 or 2, but also think you'll be out on the court with your parents at some point, trying to do and I talk about parent coaching and parent sessions. You got to be very careful, but a fun session with your
Yeah.
parents where you're playing with your parents. So many kids get into tennis because their parents actually are involved in tennis in some way and can
Mhm.
usually play a little bit. But playing with your parents or siblings or just playing with friends. So that 8 hours can involve a range of things. And then
So it's not, let me just, sorry, summarize that. It's
yeah,
not 8 hours of paid instruction that you're
that's
talking
right.
about for an
Correct.
8-year-old. It's
Yep.
maybe 1 to 2 hours of private lessons per week, maybe
Yep.
another hour or two of paid drills per
Yep.
week and
Yep.
group, and then the rest of it is
Would be some
either you're playing
competition.
in a tournament or you're playing for fun with friends and family.
Yep. That's a great way to summarize it. Perfect.
Okay,
And
good.
then as we progress along, I think you start to do more hours. Your structured tennis probably starts to increase. You're looking to try to get into some kind of elite program the private coach might be running or your federation might be running. And then you're slowly increasing your hours and I suppose your seriousness of how you're taking the sport. But I think you've got to really find the balance one thing I don't like about tennis is that we know statistically by the time you get to 14, 15, if you're not very good, and by very good, I defined as really top 10 in Australia within your birth year. If you're not very good, your chances of then going on to be a really good professional player, a top 100 player, decrease greatly. Just statistic, not my opinion, just on purely on statistics. And in Tennis Australia, we've done all the statistics. USTA probably has as well, where we've tracked back hundreds of players over the last 30 years and seen where they are at 12 and where they're at 14, where they're at 17. And we know that, to be a top 100 player, we've narrowed it down, which is what our criteria is for our academies. What used to be about that top 10 to 12 in the country in your birth year. We're like, yeah, you've got a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that that period between when you start playing tennis to the age of about 14, you do have to train a fair bit. It's the one thing I don't like as a coach. I wish you'd say, oh, I wish kids could have more of balance. I'm always trying to give them that balance, but they do need to train a certain amount of hours if you're going to be an elite junior tennis player.
Well, and it's interesting listening to what you're saying. I'm I had a light bulb moment, which is it sounds to me as though Tennis Australia's purpose in having these academies around the country was solely to identify future top professional players. It wasn't to grow the game at the grassroots level. It wasn't to make tennis more popular. It was simply to identify who has a shot at winning Grand Slams, winning top tournaments, etc.
Totally, 100%. So that was really you're absolutely spot on. Where long-term goal is who do we think can be really top 100 as opposed to Grand Slam champions. But really, the goal of Tennis Australia has always been how many players can we get, female and male, in the top 100 in the world. They can contribute to Davis Cup teams, to Fed Cup teams. They'll play in the main draw of the Australian Open, the other Grand Slams. And potentially, hopefully, one or two of them might win a doubles or a singles Grand Slam. And I suppose that in itself does grow the sport. The Australian Open is our number one showpiece for tennis in our country. It's booming. It's doing so well. Craig Tiley, who is our tournament director and CEO, he's done an incredible job the last 15 years with the tournament. We now have 1 million fans through the gate over 2 weeks of this last event. TV ratings are through the roof. It really does. It's really a launch pad for the whole year. And recreational coaching is actually booming in this country. So the average kid who goes and plays tennis or adult, I talk to all the coaches just in my city. They've got so much work. They need more courts. They need more coaches. Their businesses are booming, but it doesn't always translate into elite players. And so, yeah, like you said, those academies were purely how do we identify the best players that we have, get them into an elite program, and then stick with those kids the whole way through the journey and try to develop them into top 100 players. That was purely the goal of that program.
And there's a trickle down effect, as you're saying. When you have a lot of top players at the professional level from your country, it drives interest in the sport. And I had this conversation with Diego Moyano about US tennis, and it's a similar structure. So I think it's really important for families to understand that, if your kid isn't tapped on the shoulder by the federation, it doesn't mean that they can't be a great tennis player and play high-level college tennis, play recreational tennis as adults, and compete as adults. It just means that the federation doesn't see them having success at the professional level at the top of the game. So instead of bemoaning the federation for not tapping your child, maybe understand better what having so many great players in the top 100 from your country does for the sport overall. And I think that was a missing piece for me. Those dots were just recently connected for me, and I think that's something that we need to understand, that our federations aren't there to take care of the kid who enjoys, hit and giggle tennis with their friends. They're there to identify these top players and put resources behind them.
Yeah, it's a really important message. It's a conversation I've had with many parents, maybe kids who have maybe just missed out on getting those academies, and you sit down with them, and there's so many benefits of still going through that elite tennis journey, even if you don't make it, or you may you it doesn't matter. All, like you said to me earlier, all the things you learn from being an elite athlete or an elite
Yeah.
sportsman, the time management, the dedication, following your passion, the work ethic, the resilience that you build. There's so many great things you get out of going through that journey. And my daughters are going through the journey with dancing now, with elite dancing. Highly unlikely that they're going to be. I mean, dancing's harder to make it a profession from than tennis or any other sport, probably. There's such a small amount of people that be professional dancers. But gee, they've learnt so much from their journey through dancing and competing and training 5 days a week and winning and losing, and just how athletic they've become and the healthy habits they've become from being athletes. I mean, it's a world of benefits, isn't it? From playing sport and then, following your passion. So many players that I've seen that haven't made it. What about coaching? Now, so many have gone on to be great coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great job as well. Or administrators. We've had so many go on to be really good administrators within tennis or other sports as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many benefits of the journey. And like you said, if your federation doesn't select you, we're not even saying you can't meet in our federation. We're just saying you didn't meet the criteria. We're not even saying you can't make it.
Right.
I mean, I've written pieces on players who have made it, and we've had plenty of players who didn't meet that criteria from juniors and still went on to make it. Your chances are less, but it's still possible that you can go on and be a professional tennis player. You might be a great doubles player. You could still be a great player. I grew up with a guy by the name of Wayne Arthurs, who you might have heard of. He was a really good top 100 player. He's a top 10 doubles player. Played Davis Cup 18 ties. He played for Australia through the 90s, early 2000s. Statistically, he had one of the greatest serves of all time on the Pro Tour. And he wasn't in that. He wouldn't have made any. He wouldn't have made any academies in Tennis Australia throughout his journey.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. It is still possible. It's always.
Sure. It's always possible if you want
always
it. If you
possible.
want it.
Yeah. Determination, perseverance, persistence, passion. It is always possible to be an elite tennis player, regardless of what the federation says or not.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I want to go back to this conversation around the weekly requirements or pathway. So we talked about like the younger kids. What about when the kids are 12, 13, 14, they're starting to compete more seriously? For the boys, they're starting to go through puberty. For the girls, maybe they've already gone through puberty. And so what should they be doing on a weekly basis at that stage of things?
Yeah, look, I'm still sticking to that age and hours mantra.
But what should the breakdown be between private instruction, group instruction, competition?
Sure. So if we've got a 13-year-old kid, I've had many who are really good elite players. I like to do 2 private lessons a week with them. Each private lesson lasts an hour and a half. That's 3 hours. Then I like to run small group sessions, so not big squads, only 2 or 3 players on a court with a coach, preferably 3 times a week. So that's another 6 hours. So that's 9 hours. Then I really like the kids to be involved in larger group sessions, so they're playing with different types of players. Then all the attention's not on them, just focused on them. They get to understand that it's more than just them. So they'll be playing some kind of match play and then other drills that you do in squad that you maybe don't do in private lessons. But that's another 4 hours. So we're at
13.
13 hours. There you
Yeah.
go. So 13 hours. Now, a lot of people say that's not enough, but you've got to do strength and conditioning. So your strength and conditioning is going to take up about 4 hours, I believe, of the week, possibly longer if you're off seeing a physio and you're doing stretching at home, you're doing rehab, you can probably throw in another hour or two of that. So then you're at 18 to 19 hours throughout the week. That is a lot of training,
Yeah.
of dedication to one thing, considering that you're at school as well. And you've got to do all your homework, etc. What about your social life as well? When do you catch up with family and friends? I know, so to fit all that out in the week, I believe if you can't make it and you can't, reach your potential with that amount of hours, and adding more time on court isn't going to make it better. You're not, I don't believe it's going to make you better. I know around the country there's players doing 18, 19, 20 hours on court at age 13. You also got to protect your body. You don't want to develop terrible long-term injuries. So I believe around that 13 age, 13 hours on court, plus your strength and conditioning, I believe that's the right balance to still have a balanced life, school life, social life, etc. Potentially play another sport as well. I encourage kids to play another sport. Nick Kyrgios played basketball all the way through to the age of 16. So he did, when I say
And
played
even now.
basketball, yeah, even now, that's right.
Yeah.
He likes it even more. He
Yeah.
played one game of basketball on a Sunday for his school, and they had one training session. So it wasn't a huge commitment, 1 hour training session, 1 hour of a match.
Yeah.
And so it did so much for him. He loved it, got him away from tennis, because tennis can drive you nuts if you do so much, as we know. Got him away from tennis. You're working in team sport. It's great for his footwork, great for his hand-eye coordination, and just for his well-being, his mental health and well-being. Fantastic. So I encourage kids to play another sport if possible. I understand it's difficult for families with multiple siblings to get them everywhere and it's expensive, etc. But I really encourage kids to play other sports if you can and not just specialize and do tennis only. I've seen so many kids do tennis only, and I know some of those kids have made it, but I don't believe it's the right way to go. And it's not something I encourage. And I've got parents do it now and still having those meetings all the time. You need to find some balance in your life for your child. It's not tennis. I've had one parent who did 90 days in a row. The kid played tennis for 90 days in a row without a day off. I mean, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
You thought the more you play, the better you get.
Right. And I think that's a really important message, Todd, that more is not necessarily better, and in fact can be worse, because you're looking at increased risk of injury, increased risk of burnout, mental health instability, or whatever. But also, I just feel like it becomes all-consuming, and I am of the mindset, and listen, I'm not a coach, I'm not a pro, I don't, I'm just speaking from life experience, but you've got to take a break from things, whatever the thing is, you've got to walk away from it. And I wish I had understood that more when my son was coming up through juniors, because I was also one of those parents that was like, no, you got to get out there more, you're not doing enough, and you're behind the 8 ball, and
for sure.
and it doesn't do your kid any good, and it doesn't do your relationship with your kid any good.
Absolutely. How important is that for the rest of your life?
The most important thing from the parent side.
The most important thing. That's what I try to tell parents is the most important thing. Surely it's more important than whether your kid makes it or not. I know tennis as a sport, we've had some crazy parents and those kids have made it. But I always say for one kid who made it, who ended up having a terrible relationship with their parent and maybe never talking to them again or whatever for the rest of their life, for everyone, we've had another 99. The kids haven't made it, but they've still ended up with a terrible relationship with their family. So, gee, I mean, is it really worth it so that your kid makes it as a player? And I know we're never going to change. I'm never going to change that with some parents, but these kind of discussions are really, and education is really, really important, I believe. myself as a player, my parents were tennis coaches, but they really took the right approach. They didn't actually coach my brother and I from the age of 13 to 17 because they knew that the relationship would really suffer if they did.
Mhm.
So we actually had a different coach, which is really interesting. So they really took a step back and just purely tried to be tennis, just parents,
Mhm.
not tennis parents, just parents. And even though they had so much information to give us, we lost or won a match. All they would say, and I say this to all the parents, they'd say, bad luck. We're here to support you. We love you no matter what, you win or lose. All we care about is that you behave well and that you tried and gave everything you had. And I try to say to parents, if you could keep that message, that's it. I want 100% effort on court, no giving up, and good sportsmanship and behavior. If parents only said that and let the coaches do the rest of the job, I think that's a really simple and great message to get to deliver parents. I try to tell parents all the time. It's really hard as a parent not to get over involved in it all and start giving psychology advice and technical advice and tactical advice because you're sitting there watching. But your kids don't really want that from you. They just want unconditional love and support when they win or lose. That's what they want from their mum and dad. They're
Mhm.
happy to have the criticism or the advice or whatever from their coach. But most kids that I know, from their mum and dad, they purely want love and support.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yep.
part of, I think, the challenge from the parent side is as the parent, you have to have trust in the coach that the
Yep.
coach is doing his or her job on the tennis side, right? So I think there sometimes is a breakdown there where either the line of communication isn't open and fulfilled, where the coach is sharing with the parents, okay, we're working on this. These are the things that I'm looking for. This is where we are in the journey. This is the next step, so that the parent is informed, or the coach really doesn't have that knowledge to share. And I
Yep.
don't know how it is in Australia. In the US, it's very easy to call yourself a tennis coach and to
That's true.
take a bucket of balls out and charge hundreds of dollars an hour for instruction.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily mean they have the knowledge or the experience to
Yep.
build a developmental plan for a junior player who aspires to play at a high level, whether that's high school tennis, college tennis, or beyond.
Yep. You're totally right. You hit the nail on the head. It's exactly the same in Australia.
Yeah.
Anyone can be a tennis coach. Anyone can call themselves a high performance tennis coach. But yeah, it's really important as a high performance coach to really keep. That's why I like to keep those chains of communication open, so the parent and knows what's happening, knows what they're working on, knows what the coach is working on. And sometimes a coach can't be at all the tournaments. That's a big issue in Australia. We travel so much, big distances. So sometimes the coach wants that parent to write down some notes and how did the child go and take some notes, but then the parent preferably delivers that back to the coach as opposed to directly to the player.
Yeah.
So I think that's if you can keep, like I said, the roles are important, and if you can keep the communication lines of communication open, it's really important. But also, it is really important to find a coach who is experienced and does understand how to guide the player through and can help the player set up that great weekly training schedule with enough volume and enough hours and the right hours. That's really important as well. Something in Australia we're really struggling with now as a private coach to really set up that week. It was easy when I was running the National Academy, extremely difficult as a private coach. You're using other facilities, and Tennis Australia is running some squad sessions. It's challenging to put together a world-class training program to compete with the US and Spain and France and Russia and Czech and to compete with those countries. It's become really challenging. We're struggling in Australia for the private coaches, are really struggling to do it. We don't have many high performance coaches in Australia, not enough. I only think there's a couple in each city that are
Mhm.
really doing it properly. Um, so I think we're heading back towards national academies and Tennis Australia going to be more involved. Um, we start to panic in this country if we're not producing enough players. Federation starts to panic. You look at your junior results in world
Yeah.
teams events, etc., and if we're doing poorly, well, then it's unlikely in 5 to 10 years down the track that we're suddenly going to be having Grand Slam champions, top 100 players. You need to do well in juniors to transfer down the track. So
Yeah.
yeah, we face the same challenges here that you guys do. So it's really interesting, and it's really important as coaches, as parents, to be somewhat involved in selecting coaches and trying to get your child playing a role to set up that training week for your child and making sure that they're improving.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And this is a great segue because I want to talk a little bit about your involvement with CoachLife. And we're talking about, how it's become more challenging as a private coach in Australia. There's now this online community of coaches that have come together that are helping educate one another, helping educate us as parents, helping educate players through video content. And let's face it, our world has gone online. We have so many opportunities to connect with people that historically you just didn't have access to. And I think that's really special and really exciting. Can you talk a little bit about what attracted you to get involved with CoachLife as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. When Peter Clark, who started Coach Life, contacted me, I played with him on tour actually, but it's something that in this country we've done really poorly, is share information amongst coaches. And I find myself, even when I was working for Tennis Australia, and I've got other coaches around me, no one facilitated um, the sharing of information. We'd get together and we'd talk all this other junk, and we wouldn't talk, what we actually do, which is what drills do we do and how do you develop players and how do you deal with parents and how do you build psychology and all these things. And, to get information from other coaches around the world who have actually done it, they've repeated it, they've been successful over many years. It's absolute gold. It really is. And I just so want to be part of it because I want to give my information, but also because I really want to learn. I wanted to help Peter get this website going, and I'm just so looking forward to, haven't had a chance to look through all the videos yet. I'm so looking forward to sitting there and learning from other coaches. You look back as a coach and how you develop as a coach, nearly all the information I've got, some of it developed myself, but most of the drills came from someone else. So
Yeah.
coaches like Ray Ruffles and Bob Carmichael through the 80s and 90s, and coaches now, I know David Taylor, who was a hugely successful women's coach, Coach Sam Sosa to Grand Slam. They're the kind of coaches that I've learnt off so far. And the list of coaches that we have that on Coach Life is incredible. I mean, guys like Glenn Weiner, who spent 11 years at the IMG Academy, Sly Black, who's had multiple world number one juniors, Taylor Fritz's father. I mean, this is going to be incredible, and it really is going to open up a world. Something that I've been searching around on YouTube, etc., looking for information from other coaches. There's so little out there.
Mm.
So this is something that's new, is not coming from the players, and often the players on tour now don't really understand how they were taught, but it's coming from the coaches who did all the work and set up the programs and the environments. So it's really going to be something that's really new, and I'm really looking forward to being part of it and really learning from it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I've had an opportunity to see several of the videos, and they're pretty amazing, including yours, Todd.
Yeah, right.
Really, really good stuff. And just for my audience, Coach Life, we are kind of working with them, and not to be sales pitchy, but they are offering a discount to the Parenting Aces community. So make sure you check the show notes if this is something you're interested in pursuing. We'll have a link with the discount code for you to use. And yeah, I'm very grateful that Peter's willing to do that for us and give us access to all of this great information. And especially for families, and because of the way Australia is, and your population is kind of centered in cities, but then there are people that live outside those cities that don't have access to maybe the highest level of coaching or great facilities to go train. And we have similar situation here in the States where, if you don't live in one of the tennis hotbeds, sometimes it's very difficult to identify a great developmental coach for your child. Well, now you've got access online to all of this incredible information, and you can connect with the coaches online directly, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. People are going to be able to send me their videos of their kids or themselves, and I'll be able to look at it and make some recommendations. It's incredible now the technology we've got. But also, I would add as well that I coached Nick Kyrgios for a long period of time, and I could take credit for, you're not taking credit for he is him,
Yeah.
but I certainly played a big role in developing his serve and his forehand. So, and I have a system when I coach and I can repeat that. And I've got that on the videos online in CoachLife. So if you want to, you're trying to work on your serve and improve your serve, Nick's got one of the greatest serves of all time. And he's got a hugely attacking, aggressive and successful forehand as well. He can do anything with that shot when he's got a bit of time on the ball. So that's going to be really important. But also, I've done a little video on there as well, drills for parents. So if you're a parent and you want to add to the, you got to be careful, as I said, as a parent. If you want to add to your child's week, what drills do I do as a parent? I think that's really important as well. What drills can I do just feeding a ball or throwing a ball? You can still go out and do a great session with your child to maybe add to their training week. If you are isolated, or you can't afford another session. It's such an expensive sport. To be able to get out there, do a free session with a child can be really beneficial to them. So I've talked about what is the best way as a parent to run a little training session for your child and keep the relationship good and everyone's happy and having a fun, enjoyable session. They also get something out of it.
That's awesome. I love that. And I'm really going to encourage all of you watching or listening to this to check out CoachLife. Again, all the links will be in the show notes. So make sure you check those out, and including that discount code. You don't want to miss out on that. But the price point's very reasonable too. I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but it's like
About
a
two private
year's.
lessons, I reckon. About
Yeah,
two
that's
private
what I was going to
lessons.
say. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's comparable to 1 or 2
yeah,
private lessons here in the
that's right.
States for a whole year of access. So
That's right. And a
pretty
huge amount,
amazing.
something like 600 videos. So it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Todd, anything we haven't touched on that we need to hit before we wind this up?
Oh, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? But I think that's probably enough for today. I'd love to talk to you again. There's so many issues in tennis that we can talk about. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. So great that you're running a podcast, particularly for tennis parents. They're such important part of the journey, and it's just been great to talk tennis with you.
Same, same. I loved meeting you, and you're welcome back anytime. You have an open invite. So just shoot me an email. We'll get it on the books. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces.